Welcome back to the show, everybody. Well, check out these headlines here. BRICS coalition moving quickly. We've got a lot of news for you to see, and involves Saudi Arabia and a lot of other countries. We also have this. John Deaton just in. SEC versus Ripple, all or nothing, split decision. Let's hear from him in the latest. We are weeks and days away. Somebody roll that beautiful intro.
Digital Perspectives with Brad Kimes. Come on in.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. You can follow us on Twitter and YouTube for exclusive content. Right now, $1.19 trillion market cap for crypto. The market is up 0.9%. Good afternoon, everybody. Just over 27,000 right now for Bitcoin, 1890 and change for Ethereum. Tether market cap 83.2 billion plus. XRP is 51 cents right now, up 11.7% on the 7-day. How about that? We'll take it for now, right? Let's look at this, ladies and gentlemen, because this is your personal alternative to banking. It's GlintPay. Don't mess around. Click DPV50 for your code, your referral code, and get 50% off your vaulting and insurance fees for the next 12 months. This is going to be a limited time offer. The door will shut. This is a chance for you to really gain control of your own alternative to banking right now, using gold and your dollars. Do not mess around. Click that link. So many have taken advantage of it. I got so many incredible messages from people who have done it like myself. Check out my sponsor. After the close of business yesterday, the CFTC put out a risk management rule proposal that could eventually govern how the derivatives industry deals with crypto. Talking about the spot market, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we're talking about. And I think if it's going to lie anywhere, the spot market should lie at the CFTC and certainly not at the SEC. But we'll see how this shakes out because we're not done yet. Warren Davidson here is visiting on a show here, and it's the Timcast, and you're going to want to hear what he says because he's not letting off the pressure. He knows Gary Gensler and Elizabeth Warren are in, and they are the henchmen to crypto. And listen to what he says about restructuring the SEC.
We're working to get rid of Gary Gensler. I gave a hearing where I was able to communicate with him and say, look, I plan to fire you. We've got a bill that basically restructures the Securities and Exchange Commission and eliminates the chairmanship, i.e. fires Gary Gensler as chairman. He would still be a commissioner. And right now there are 5 commissioners. Originally it was created as a commission because the commission was supposed to do the decision making. And then they supercharged the powers of the chairman. And Gary Gensler is front running everybody. I mean, he's moving ahead of Congress. He's Republicans and Democrats, the House, the Senate. He's moving ahead of Treasury. He's moving ahead of CFTC. And frankly, it's all to impose his will on everything. And so there's almost no accountability. The commission, you either have 4 commissioners that are useless, or you need, and 1 chairman, or you go back to say, look, our capital markets are the best in the world. I mean, look, we got 4 or 5% of the world's population, 25% of the world's GDP, but we have over 50% of the world's invested capital. I mean, why would you mess that up? But Gary Gensler is in the process of messing it up. And you look at crypto, he's clearly declared war on crypto. He's a henchman for Elizabeth Warren, and he's front running everything for Elizabeth Warren, frankly, Sherrod Brown, who's the chairman of Senate Banking. So they're doing nothing over there except incentivizing him to do this. The way to rein him in is to restructure the Securities and Exchange Commission.
And that's exactly right. And I hope Warren Davidson gets a chance to do exactly that. And I want to remind everybody, why is this a great pushback? Well, it's Gary Goldman Gensler and Elizabeth Warren, who is obviously taking banking money. And if you look deep enough, that's where the fight's coming from. The banking, the lobbying money from the banking. That's where this fight's coming from. They want to give up the king of the hill? No, they don't. Not unless they know they're going to remain king of the hill. And speaking of king of the hill, BRICS nations say new currency may offer shield from sanctions. Boom. Yeah, well, listen, you know what? That's the goal. Shout out to Gold Telegraph for this, because that is the goal. And I'm about to show you the next few pieces of BRICS information and news here today that's going to let you know just how serious it is and how quickly they are moving. Remember, they have a meeting collectively in August where they're going to talk exactly about being able to switch and use a currency, a new reserve currency for that coalition. Again, think about the world broken up into fractionalized payment zones. Take a listen here.
You know, many countries declare their desire to be invited into the BRICS group. For instance, today you met with the delegation from Saudi Arabia, who also expressed their desire to do that. Could you please tell us about the progress that is being made in this direction, and why do you think BRICS attracts so many countries? Thank you.
Well, indeed, we discussed this issue, and I did discuss it with the minister from Saudi Arabia this morning. As regards the approach of BRICS, it is still being shaped, it's evolving, and the Sherpas reported to us about the results they reached at this stage, and the chair authorized them to continue after they have listened to comments which were made by each of us at the meeting. BRICS is a different structure. It's a new organization based on the principles of equality, mutual respect, consensus, non-interference, and strict adherence to the United Nations Charter, to all its principles in their interlinkages. It is not for BRICS, you know, to pick and choose something which you like in the charter for this particular situation, and then to do the opposite for another situation. So it's, I think BRICS symbolizes the evolution of the multipolar world, which is talked about very often and more so, and the attraction to more than a dozen countries of BRICS is a testimony to that.
And there you have that. It's getting very real, talking about multipolarity. Multipolarity, ladies and gentlemen. We know what that means. While you're distracted with the current administration president falling down. Oh, boy. Nevertheless, take a look at this, because the currency could be backed by gold. Remember, and we're going to take a look at something. Did I pull that? Let me see if I pulled that for us. I think I do have that. I have a graph that's going to show us the BRICS coalition and the rate that they're growing compared to the G7. And you're going to want every single bit of it. Remember, more than half the world's population by the time these new country applicants join into BRICS, more than half of the world's natural resources. Take a listen.
BRICS group meeting this year with foreign ministers from the 5 nations gathering in Cape Town today. Now, that comes ahead of a leader summit set for August. For more on this, let's go to Jennifer Zabazaja, our Africa correspondent who is in Cape Town. Jen, what are the priorities for the leaders meeting this week?
Yeah, Danny, I mean, it's really significant. As we know, BRICS was started back when a lot of these economies that encompass this organization were known as emerging economies. But of course, as we know, that's really grown in significance, and especially when we consider what the world is facing at this point in time. So when we look at the agenda, the official agenda, there's a few top line details that are going to be discussed this year, including delivering a mutually accelerated growth, sustainable development, and inclusive multilateralism. There's also some points about how BRICS, this grouping of nations, can create synergies between that of the G20. And of course, as we know, China, Russia, India, Brazil, and South Africa encompass a significant proportion of the future growth of the global economy. And so a lot of discussion is going to be had on how they can move forward in what they're calling a multipolar world.
And that is a narrative, a multipolar, multi-asset backed world. The IMF has been carrying this narrative. We've been talking about it for years on this channel. It is coming to fruition. And you heard her talk right there. Jennifer just said she's talking about the synergies between the G20 and the BRICS coalition. Again, I feel like all of this is loosely coordinated where everybody's going to join a certain crowd, and then these fractionalized payment zones will work together collectively.
As you mentioned earlier, there is potentially going to be discussions about a currency derived specifically for these BRICS nations. And especially when we think about the world as globally moving away from the dollar, we're seeing potentially discussions around whether or not BRICS can create a currency pegged to specific minerals, things like gold. And so that will be among the things that are discussed this week. But here in Cape Town, a number of foreign ministers, as you mentioned, the 5 from the BRICS nations, but then also a number of foreign ministers from nations from what they're calling the Friends of the BRICS. So that includes foreign minister from Argentina, from Indonesia, from Egypt, and from the UAE and Saudi. And so a lot.
More confirmation of Saudi Arabia, and I got that for you too. Look at this meeting happening here with Russia and the finance minister and Saudi delegation at a BRICS meeting right here. Look at everybody. Everybody's all nice and chummy. Yeah. Saudi Arabia is the country that has the petrodollar agreement, ladies and gentlemen, where the elevated status of the U.S. dollar for the global reserve currency comes from. And in return, the U.S. provides military protection to these people and country. And they're sitting down and hammering out a deal is what it looks like to me. It is to be taken very seriously. Here is a BRICS versus G7. Shout out to Going Underground for this one here. You can take a look at this chart and see how the G7 is diminishing as BRICS is growing here. You can see the year as it goes. And watch as we get into 2021 and beyond, and then the projection beyond today even. It parallels, it kind of runs a gap here, 2013 to 2016, then starts to close. And then right here in 2019, 2020, BRICS actually crosses in GDP. And we know, look at this, in the projected forecast going into 26, 2030. This is what we're looking at, ladies and gentlemen. This is why we can't scoff at these things. And I don't believe it'll be a next Tuesday event either, barring some black swan event. But nevertheless, we have to be aware that these things are happening. And I don't find that what is taking place on a geopolitical level to be mutually exclusive from what we're following with these payment rails. You know, everyone focuses on XRP. How about focusing on XRP Ledger? Because that's the first decentralized exchange for the world. That's what this is about. He who controls the gold makes the rules. Well, he who controls the payment rails rules the world. And obviously, SWIFT isn't working as it used to. So there's a new solution in play. And it's fractionalized payment zones and a bridge currency that sits in between it. Much like the Bancor coin that was suggested in the creation of Bretton Woods back in the day by John Maynard Ferguson. But it's not there anymore. That's not where, or John Maynard Keynes, excuse me. So that's not where we are. We have the technology to do all of this. It's well in place. And you can see these countries beginning to move towards that. And I believe the transition is years long, but nevertheless, it is happening. Now, I'll tell you what else is happening. It's the SEC versus Ripple case. We could be days or weeks away, and I just happened to catch the most recent opinion and insight perspective from John Deaton, representing 76,000 of us XRP holders in a class action lawsuit here. Listen to what he has to say when he's asked about whether he thinks this is a all or nothing split decision. How's this going to go? Take a listen to what he says here. Shout out to everybody there.
That the SEC, because of the theory they chose, may have snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. And it's because this, guys, when you start off as an altcoin, at the very beginning, Ripple had 80% of the XRP and the founders had 20.
Yep.
you got to sell it to someone or give it away. Whatever you're doing, those initial things meet the Howey test. If Satoshi Nakamoto, when he was mining, he, she, they, whatever, when he was mining Bitcoin by himself, right? If he would have said, hey, John Deaton, give me 25 grand and I'll give you 100,000 Bitcoin. And I did, and I sat back while he mined more Bitcoin and it became more, that would meet the Howey test, right? That specific transaction could meet the Howey test. And so yes, the judge could find those early sales as violating or meeting the Howey test. The problem is the SEC went with this all or nothing type of theory, right? That all sales of XRP, past, present, future, ongoing, in perpetuity, forever. The token itself is an underlying investment representation of an investment contract. So I think she's going to slam that theory down. They're going to lose that. Whether or not I believe she's going to split the baby, I can't really say, because we haven't seen a lot of specific sales, right? So for example, it's all been sealed. I can tell you, when you read the summary judgment briefs, the only thing the SEC said in the summary judgment brief was, well, in 2014, Ripple sent about a brochure about XRP to about 100 people. Now, the judge could say that was an offering, right? That even though there may not have been any sales, that was an offering. And so if there are a lot of specific sales where she could dig her feet and hands into, then yes, conventional wisdom is that she could say 2013 to 2018, you're in violation, ongoing and future. But here's the problem, guys. There is no sufficient decentralization factor in the Howey test. And that's, so when people say, they rely on the Hinman speech of sufficient decentralization, that's not a part of the Howey test. And so if I had to pick a winner that would win everything, and I'm not picking it, but if I did, I'd pick Ripple to win, because the SEC's theory is so freaking absurd. But the conventional wisdom is she'll find a way to split the baby, and we're going to see soon.
And we are going to see soon. And I want to shout out John Deaton for sharing his insights and his perspectives on where this case is. I have said this a lot. I will not be surprised if it's a split decision and the judge goes with some decision based on the early sales, but then gives the blessing for XRP from the creation of ODL's commercial use on forward, and then declaring also that XRP secondary retail sales are in fact not securities. That to me is a pretty solid outcome. And then it also, if you want to think of it in long term, if the judge does decide that the early sales, as John explained, use an example of Bitcoin or any other coin that you want to use, any judge could make the case that the early sales always start out as a security, then that gives the SEC the hammer they need to continue to pound this market until legislation makes its way through Congress. And that could be a couple years away. Not financial advice from me, him, or anyone else. It's just my digital perspectives. I'll catch all of you on the next one.